All right. I'm here today to do an interview with Gregory Crane. Now, Gregory is somebody that I met through the Sub2 community, and I'm glad I did. Greg is, I would say, the ultimate connector in the sense that he goes back to what I call the Rolodex days. If I need to know somebody, I call Greg and say, hey, Greg, who do you know that does this? Hey, Greg, who do you know that does that? And Greg's been there for me. He's connected me with private money lender that I've ended up using. He's connected me with people. He just said, hey, I think you ought to talk to this guy. I talked to him, and now I'm doing some wholesale deals with him. So Greg is definitely a guy that you need to talk to. And the reason I wanted to bring him on today is this is the series where we try to talk about wins. We want to have wins that we can talk to about the Sub2 community from the point of view of either using a PML or being a PML. So with that intro, Greg, nice to see you today.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me.
All right.
And thank you for that nice intro.
That's right. So yeah, I really consider you, a good friend, and I think I've only known you for maybe 8 weeks,
hmm
somewhere in that area.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It was
yeah,
meeting you at the local meetup in Knoxville and hearing you and Zach and a couple others talk that really was the signal to me that said I really need to bite the bullet and join Sub2. The Gator community is great, but you guys had just such a great wealth of knowledge and the facility with which you talked about the business that was enviable, and so now here I am.
oh, that's great to hear. So tell me a little bit about your background. What made you decide to jump into the Sub2 and real estate investing community?
That's a great question. So my background is I'm from California. Moved out to Knoxville, Tennessee in 2020 during the pandemic. And I took an interest in real estate 15 years ago. Timed it perfectly in 2007, just when everything was going
Timing's
upside
everything.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was at a period of my life where I was in transition and didn't really know what I was going to do when I grew up. So I was like, I'll go to a bunch of seminars and buy the courses and chase every shiny object, and made some, woeful decisions and lost some money, and that was a long story for another time. And so I sort of put my investment dreams in the background and settled down into corporate life and bought a house in Bay Area and did well on that over 10 years. And then cut to this year, moved out here and had a little transition with work due to pandemic and not being in state anymore. And just realized, I needed to pursue my entrepreneurial spirit again. I needed to carve out my own future. And I've always known that real estate was the best way to do that, as long as you did it smart. And so I really became fascinated. I was like, I'm not going to do wholesaling or buy and hold. I want to find a way to kind of accelerate my trajectory. And this notion of being the bank and finding ways to leverage the assets that you have and hold the paper, I felt was a really smart way to go. So became interested in note investing, and then private lending as another vehicle for that.
Yeah,
And then, yeah.
that's a great way to get started in real estate. Pace says you should use other people's money. Basically, you're
hmm
borrowing other people's money, right? And the way
hmm
that I put it is not only can you use other people's money, but you can use other people's experience. And so if you're
hmm
coming in as the banker, you don't need to know everything about property. What you need to do is to have the right connections, and you're essentially leveraging or borrowing those other people's experience. So coming in as a brand new person, if you've got any kind of funds, that's what Pace says to do is, partner up, squat up, and, put a little money in the deal, which makes you attractive as a partner. And then you
hmm
get to learn, you get to see all the inside and outside and everything. So is there a specific deal that you'd like to talk about today that we can share as a win?
Well, just on that note, it didn't come to me specifically from the Sub2 community, but it came from a lot of the local networking that I've been doing. So, when I joined Gator, I sort of realized, there's a lot of great people here. I'm going to make networking my superpower, and that's how I'm going to market my business. And I grew my network within that community very quickly, and also made sure that I was developing. A local network. So, as part of my networking within the local RIAs, one of the gentlemen who runs the RIA has done well as an investor and as an agent. And they sort of knew that I was doing transactional funding and interested in doing gap funding and things like that. So he got a duplex under contract for about 60% of the appraised value. The rehab we knew was going to be in the 50 range. So we knew there was going to be a good spread there. And he came to me and said, hey, I've got this deal. Do you want to partner up on it? You bring the gap funding, sort of the skin in the game for the hard money lender. And then we partner on it and we DSCR it once we've done that work. And, um, and then we just cash flow. So to me, that seemed like a really great opportunity to, like you said, leverage that person's experience, their ability to, find great deals, and I just brought in the capital. So right now we're just getting started on the rehab. We've closed on it. We're looking at about 8 weeks of rehab, and then the dream would be have nothing in it, and just refinance it out, have about 50 or 60K in equity sitting there, and positive cash flow. So to me, it seems like a really solid deal. Most importantly, because I'm partnering with someone who's a trusted leader in the area.
Yep, you're definitely leveraging that experience that he has. Now,
Yeah.
this I take it because he's the leader. This isn't like it's his first deal, right?
No, he's
No.
done several. He has a partner, and they run the meetup together. And his partner always sort of refers to him as a net worth millionaire. Someone who's done a handful of flips and holds rental property. And so that was part of what attracted me to him. He's also really just like a down to earth, cool guy from Florida. Not really a smooth talker, just more of a dude, and I consider myself a dude. So
Right.
I feel
Not a
like we
salesman,
we
not trying to talk you into anything, just talking to you
exactly,
about
just
the
like
opportunity.
exactly, and just said,
Right.
I know you're trying to get into some of these deals and find opportunities for cash flow, because the end of the day, for me, financial freedom is about long-term cash flow. So while I really enjoy private lending, at least a lot of the stuff that I've been doing is the 3 to 5 month gap funding stuff that has a great return. But I can sense that I will constantly be having to churn for these opportunities. So ideally, more opportunities like this where I could be a private money partner, put in 30 to 40,000, maybe leave that in the deal, maybe refinance some of it out, and then have a positive net cash flow and some of those tax benefits, I think um, is the ideal goal for me.
Yeah, it's a strong plan. And just to go back so that everybody understands, when you talk about gap funding, that's where the PML comes in with the money. And give us a little bit more information about that for the brand new people
Sure.
and stuff too that don't know what gap funding is, transactional funding, what the heck is that?
Absolutely. Great question. So I'll just give you specifics on the deal. It's a 185 duplex that appraised at 320. The rehab scope was about 55K. So we went to a hard money lender who was going to give us 10.5% and 2 points, interest only. And so they would be able to fund 90% of the total cost. So the 185 plus I think it was ended up being a $60,000 bid. So that's 245. So I think I ended up having to come to the closing table with 30 plus some closing costs. So that's the gap funding. It's ideally it's the deals that I've done where I provided gap funding. I'm in a second position. The hard money lender is in the first position, and we'll talk about some of the challenges around that later. But yeah, that's what the
Yeah.
term gap
So the
means.
gap funding really is what the traditional real estate investor out there thinks that I need to come up with for my down payment.
The
That's
skin
what
in
I
the
need to
game,
come up with for money. I can't buy real estate because I don't have any money, right? I check my bank
right?
account. I don't have 30,000. What am I going to do? No one's going to loan me 30,000. So that's where you
Exactly.
went. You can go to a PML or a private money lender and you can get that gap funding, and you have to have an entry plan, an exit plan. You have to have all of that. So we can't just have, somebody walk up to you on the street and say, hey, would you loan me $30,000? I got this really good deal. The reason you went with this specific deal is because it was from someone who was already experienced. You were leveraging their experience. Did he have, because people are different, but did he have a written plan? Was he able to share with you kind of the underwriting of what was going on, what the plan was?
Not anything written he presented me, but because he's a realtor in the area, I know that he's very familiar with what appraised values are and what rental values are. So we didn't, ideally, I would like to have spreadsheets that say, all right, here's our cost of capital, here's what it is to get into it, here's the carrying costs, and then here's how everything breaks down, with the expenses. And I definitely want to encourage everyone to use like the bigger pockets calculators and some of those things. And actually, I tried using the bigger pockets calculators, but it didn't have a specific tool for purchase, hard money loan, and then essentially it's a burr that we're doing, right? Buy, rehab, re refinance, and rent, which is what we'll
Right.
be doing, at the end of the day.
Right. And then when you talked about your DSCR loan, that's the loan that will refinance after everything is all done. And what that loan
Correct.
stands for is that it's a debt service instead of looking at, your income. Like with a traditional loan, you go out. I was a realtor for many years, and honestly, in California, I bought all of my properties with a 70% conforming loan. I had to come up with 30%. And so did I buy properties every day? No.
Right.
Especially in
Exactly.
California, right?
Yeah.
I would buy, maybe 2 properties a year, best case scenario when I was first starting, and then I had to build up the cash and build up the cash in order to go out and buy more properties. If I had had access to the programs with Subto and all of the PML lenders and all the other things that I now have access to, the difference would have been stark. I was a realtor first and investor second. Now
Hmm.
I'm an investor. I'm not even a realtor anymore. Different
Yeah,
state,
and
didn't bother to get my license.
you're
Yeah.
shifting that focus, right? Or that
Yes.
that mindset of that with OPM and with the right deal,
Correct.
most everything is possible.
Right. Because as a realtor, I had a really good job. And as an investor, I have a really good investment in my future. That's what it comes
Hmm.
down to. So,
Absolutely.
going back, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but going
No, it's
back to
fine.
the story about, you went with him because he had the experience. And I've talked about the fact that if you're a brand new person, you can't expect that you're just going to post, hey, I need a PML. And then, okay, what do you need this money for? It's a really good deal, right? They're going to need one of two things. They're either going to have that track record, which says, you know what you're doing and you have the experience that the PML lender is borrowing or leveraging, or they have to have a rock solid plan. Now,
Absolutely.
I've talked with other people, and the best way to do that is you can take your deal, you can go over to Deal or No Deal, you can take it over to Bo for underwriting, and they can look at it and kind of go through the numbers. And if they give you the approval, well, then you're on the start of now you're leveraging, in a sense, you're leveraging Bo's experience if he's underwriting the deal. So, yeah,
Right.
you have to have your numbers in line before you can expect that the PML lenders are just going to, throw money at you.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's giving me pause right now is with interest rates and with the softening of the market, a lot of these deals that we're looking at are do a rehab and then sell it and get that closed in 90 to 120 days. Well, things are staying on the market longer, things are softening, people aren't able to pay what they were just paying a couple of months ago. And I'll be honest, it's making me skittish about going into the next quarter and taking on those particular types of deals unless there's a huge amount of spread. So, in terms of the underwriting I like to do and my partner, it's the property as is value now. It's looking at ARV comps, and then really underwriting the investor. I'm meeting investors from all over. Some are within our community and some are not. Just because they're in our community doesn't mean they have a golden badge seal of approval. So, I want to see HUDs and statements of the deals that they've done. I want to see pictures. And anyone who kind of balks at that information, it doesn't seem like they would be a reputable person to have a partnership with.
Well, that's fair. You've got to look out for, the funds that you have. It's for your
Mhm,
family at the end of the day. And on the other
mhm,
side of the coin, you're not saying that you won't work with somebody new. You're just asking them to go through the proper steps because they can't validate everything with their experience. Then they need to validate it all by leveraging other people's experience. One of the best ways to do that is instead of if you're a brand new person and you've got a deal, instead of trying to take that deal and then find a PML and try and find this and find that, well, you can go to the group and you can look for people to squat up with, to joint venture, And
mhm.
I think one of the most important things on that is, finding the right TC. There's a lot of people out there that they don't get involved with the TC, and I think you should get involved with them early.
Hmm. Absolutely. And all the PML deals I've done, I've used the same TC, and they've really been a great guide. And it's It's tough. It's a tricky thing because the TC is not a lawyer, but we look to them to kind of make sure all the paperwork is in order and that you have proper protection. So that can be well, it should always be a note and a deed of trust. It should be a joint venture agreement between yourself and the investor. Quite often, we're charging higher than sort of standard interest rates for short-term gap funding loans. So the joint venture agreement allows you to have some protection in terms of what is allowable under the law, to be honest, because it is a partnership. It's a private money partnership in a way, and so you're receiving a higher than normal return that a normal lender would receive.
Yeah. So
Other
I was
sorry, I
just
was
going to
going to
say, so
say,
another way to put that is, as a lender, you go and you get a loan. They have no interest in the property, and they are subject to laws which determine how much interest they can charge. If it's owner occupied, obviously you got all the laws that protect people there. But even as a non-owner occupied, there are, rules and regulations that are set in place to protect them from lenders. Now, if you go into partnership, the reason that there aren't really as many rules and regulations is because we don't want the US government to come in and tell us who we can partner with and who we can't partner with and how we should structure our deals with partners. So that's why it fits in nicely when you're doing a joint venture. You don't have to think about it as your lender as much as you are a partner. And with a partner, if one partner brings in money or both of them bring in money, right, there's no rules or regulations on that. If at the end of the day the goal is that everybody's going to get a return, but you want to have that return written out clearly in that joint venture agreement.
yeah, and the agreement with my partner on the duplex, we did form an LLC just because this was something we intend to hold long term, and so it made sense to have it under an LLC. One attorney suggested just doing a partnership, but the hard money lender informed us that when it came time to refinance, having an LLC was going to make that process a lot smoother. So we formed an LLC and paid that expense up front, had a proper operating agreement. And we had just sort of a verbal agreement between us, which I should probably get down in writing, which is just that because I put up the seed capital when that refinance came back time, I wanted a small interest, like a 10% on that money, mostly to cover carrying costs because I'm using a home equity line to be able to have access to that capital for the short term.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
you've got to the number one thing that messes people up is expectations, right? Different people have different expectations. A lot of times the expectations in my head, it's like, well, my expectation is that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then the other person's thinking we're going to do A, B, and C. And so when they're
Hmm.
not meshing, it's not a matter of, well, I had a bad partner as much as it is, you might not have had a good plan. And so I
Hmm.
always say the best way to make a plan is, plan the divorce during the honeymoon.
Hmm.
So when everybody is first excited about the project, let's sit down and talk about, okay, what if the market crashes tomorrow and we go to break even? Who gets paid first? What if it's tomorrow and you have to look at these things and one of us gets picked up by the aliens, right? Is and
Hmm.
goes to another state, state of confusion, whatever. Anyway, the point is what's going to happen in these scenarios. And so it's something that we don't like to think about because as entrepreneurs, we want to talk about the excitement. We want to talk about everything else. We don't want to talk about these negatives, right? We're supposed to
Exactly.
overcome the negatives. But that's the one time when you should sit down and literally think of everything that can go wrong, put it down and just say, okay, let's just come up with a contingency plan. You know,
Hmm.
I would say, we have to have a plan that works as the backup plan to the backup plan. So always
Hmm.
have a backup plan to the backup plan that's ready in case you
ABC.
need a backup plan. Yep.
Yeah, and
If
that
you don't
makes me
have
think
three of them, you
about
don't have anything.
the underwriting that I do. It's always all right, what's your exit strategy to pay me back on this deal? And what's your exit strategy when that doesn't happen? And so I'm
Yep.
getting better at those contingencies.
Yep. Yep. I've had some, because I've been doing this a long time and I've had properties, went into the '07, '08, kind of expected that we were going to have the slowdown, kind of got all the, batten down the hatches, get everything ready. At the time in Chico, California, was expecting, we could have up to 30% decreases in price. And that was like, that would be dramatic. That had never happened before, but let's prepare for that. So we prepared for that. we got hit with almost 50%. So it's like preparing for, a big storm that's going to come through and then finding out that it's a hurricane instead.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
there was a lot of lessons learned on that. I'll tell you what.
Brutal,
Yep.
bud.
Yeah.
Brutal.
But because we had at least planned for that, like I did a lot of lease options. And so I just made sure that the lease options, they weren't extended beyond '07. So I wasn't going to be hanging out with those. I ended up in the end, there was some, my biggest issue is I always want to help people. I'm a real softy. I should not be the one going and collecting money. I go to collect money and sometimes they really need it and I end up loaning them money instead of collecting money. So
Hmm.
that's my weakness. So going into '08, I ended up with like 5 properties that the lease option had expired. I should have just kicked them out and sold the property, but I felt bad for the tenants. So, I worked an extension out with them. Well, when that big storm hit, then all those people that I had helped, they just turned around and said, "Oh well, the market's crashed. I don't think it will. The market value will ever come up again." And they basically bailed and left the problem with me. So, lesson learned. I still have a big heart. I still want to help people, but I've made sure that someone else is in that position to be the one to make those decisions and say, okay, just like we're talking about on this, if the worst case happens, we have a plan. We're going to execute the plan. We talked about it ahead of time. Maybe Sean isn't the guy to go over and tell those tenants that, I'm sorry, but you have to move out. But we have somebody in place to do
Hmm.
that.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Who, not how.
Yeah, because as I've gotten older, I've learned that I'm not going to overcome that.
Hmm.
The setbacks that I've had in my life have come from me putting myself in a position that I shouldn't have put myself in, not because I wasn't hard enough or I wasn't this or I wasn't that. No, I am who I am. I'm always going to be the guy that is reaching down to try and help people. And occasionally you're going to be some of those people are, they're just people, right? They're in a bad
Hmm.
situation. They're thinking about saving themselves first, even though you're trying to help them. It's like those
Yeah.
guys that swim out to try and save people that are drowning, right? And
Yeah.
then what happens? They clamber all over you and they try and drown you. That's why they teach the lifeguards to go out there and they throw that thing around them and they drag them backwards. And that's not what the people want. The people want to be able to climb on top of you. It doesn't work that
Right.
way. Everybody ends up drowning. So yeah, it's about putting the right people in place. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because you're, trying to provide this as a resource to people who are interested in private lending. If you're interested in the mechanics of private lending, but not necessarily don't have the capital to lend yourself, the connector role is definitely a strong one. Which is, if connector is your avatar and networking is really your superpower, you can, act as that conduit between, people who need money and people who have money, and get paid a bit of a referral fee there. So I've done a few of those deals that way, and it's been a great way to develop, relationships with more investors and more lenders.
Yeah, that's really cool. So not only do you have leveraging other people's, experience and skills, but now you're leveraging other people's money and yet you're still involved in the deal. You still get to
Yeah, exactly.
learn, you see all the parts. Yeah. And I think that's a valuable role. And some people look at it as, it's not that big of a deal. And like I said, I think you're a super connector. I think that anyone should be reaching out and talking to you, even if they don't quote unquote know what they need yet, because
Hmm.
you're the Rolodex guy. Let's get everybody in your Rolodex. And then when I say, hey, Greg, I need someone that can go and talk to these tenants, get them to move out tomorrow. You can tell me, hey, I got Guido on the other line. We'll get it
Oh
taken care
yes, Guido,
of.
go get your shine
Right.
box.
That's right. So, all right. Well, any other advice for people that are looking for PMLs out there as new?
I would say, if someone says they need something funded ASAP, tell them no, thank you. That was always something that causes me great pause. And really, just no matter how experienced someone says that they are, really try and get your data and a lot of information to be able to just verify who people are, because I don't want to see anybody get burned on a deal.
Yeah. So Pace says, get your lenders set up before you need them.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Have that Rolodex.
Yeah. So, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I'm on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Greg Crane. Um, email is gregorycrane865, which is the Knoxville area code, gregorycrane865 @gmail.com. And yeah, I love talking to investors. I'm looking to grow my business into more acquisitions and buy and hold, private money partnerships. So I'm certainly open to opportunities in Tennessee as well as Western North Carolina.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you so
being here
much, Sean.
today.
This is
We'll
fun.
put on a little music and talk to you all later.